Good morning and welcome to day 3 of Distance Learning in Mr. Bidwell's AP Human Geography course. Hopefully everyone at this point is very comfortable with this format and following the 4 steps for each day. Again, if you have any questions, I am available via phone call or email. And feel free to contact me with any questions about previous content. All right, we're moving on today. So day 3, here's our content objective. We are going to, by the end of the lesson, you should be able to explain how business services are distributed through global urban areas and describe the factors influencing the growth and spatial distribution of large cities in our contemporary world. That's a lot, so just review that real quick. And again, basically, we're looking at the distribution of business services and ranking global cities in a contemporary world. Breaking it down, first, describe the key factors that are used to identify global major cities. Secondly, describe the 4 levels of hierarchical global ranking urban areas. Then, discuss the rankings according to alpha, beta, and gamma world city rankings within those 4 levels of urban rankings. 3, compare and contrast world cities and mega cities using key urban characteristics. Just to give you a heads up, world cities are going to be in the more developed regions, and then mega cities will be in the less developed regions, primarily today in the 21st century. And 4, describe how China is leading the way in transitioning from a mega cities or from a country with several mega cities to meta cities. All right, just to start, all urban settlements provide consumer services, which we've already learned in previous units. We talked about the central place theory yesterday as well as the gravity model, and we understand the distribution of services within urban settlements. Larger settlements, they have more specialized services. Smaller settlements have less specialized services in MDCs. But when we look at the consumer services, they're not in every settlement. We understood that a little bit, hopefully, with understanding consumer services according to central place theory with the levels of settlements, that when we look at hamlets or we look at towns, they have less specialized services. And if they have less specialized services, they're for surely not going to have business services. So if we think about this, CPT, and we think about large settlements being more specialized, they're going to have the business services. Secondly, urban settlements tend to specialize in one or few business services. So when we think of Minneapolis-St. Paul area, they're going to specialize in just a few services. And one of them that we're seeing right now is the medical and healthcare business services. They're one of the leading service providers in finding rapid testing for the coronavirus as well as vaccination. So we can see that in Minneapolis-St. Paul, we specialize in medical and healthcare in that business service. And third, there are 4 levels of urban settlements, and according to their importance of business services. So we will rank those business services on a global level. All right, when we look at ranking global cities, the factors that are used are economic factors. So think of it like multinational corporations, financial institutions, headquarters, any factors that control the movement of money. So transnational corporate headquarters, those are all economic factors they look at. Secondly, they'll look at political factors. Those are leading political organizations, so they could be international, supranational organizations like we talked about with political geography, United Nations, the European Union, the Asian Pacific exporting countries. Those are what we're talking about, political factors, in addition to headquarters of capital governments that are mostly MDCs. So like Washington, D.C. would be a political factor. Cultural factors, we are looking at institutions that have impact in the media, so news media, social media. We look at sports facilities, entertainment. Cultural value can oftentimes play into the entertainment or consumer services of retail, wholesale, as well as hospitality, which goes back to day one. And then also educational institutions would fall within the factors that are used to rank global cities. Um, Continuing with ranking global cities, they want to identify other factors such as infrastructure, a major internet airport, healthcare facilities, advanced communication, technologies. These are all important for infrastructure. And then communication, the again, communication goes from the telegraph, transitions to the telephone in the 19th century, and the computer in the 20th century. Now we're in the knowledge-based age or the information age, where communication is the internet, and we're looking at broadband width, which is going to be important. Transportation. The evolution of transportation. We'll get to Borchart's Epics of Transportation, but now what we're looking at is transportation is motor vehicle and airplanes, but not just motor vehicles and airplanes. We're looking at light rails, mass transits, because the ranking of cities is always evolving, as are tertiary service jobs. All right, quickly review those 6 factors. All right, let's continue on with taking a look at global cities, also referred to as world cities. Just in summation, they've controlled the flow of information in the global economy. So they are business services. Remember from day one, business for services. They facilitate a transaction that can be professional. That can be of professional service, such as between bankers or financiers, or it could be information technology programmers. Again, they'll control the flow of information. Um, they also have large corporate headquarters. Large corporate headquarters are located in mostly Europe, Japan, as well as Europe, where they have over 91 of the top 100 multinational corporations. And then global cities are ranked in some textbooks in the alpha, beta, gamma, which I'll point out as I get through the notes today. And those rankings will fall in that order, where alpha will have the largest concentrations of services that fall within the factors of economic, political, culture, and infrastructure. And as you move further down, they'll have less impact on the global scale. And then we get to the the alpha plus plus are going to be the world dominant cities, which is New York City, London, and Tokyo. Those cities are going to have control of most of those factors that we just talked about with economic, political, culture, and infrastructure. All right, so we can look at the distribution in terms of the ranking. What we can see here, again, hopefully you can read the disclaimer below. They're the centers for the provisions of services in the global economy. So within this globalized world, there are 2 dominant global cities, New York City and London. So what that tells us, there's the largest concentration of all business services, consumer services, public services found within those 2 large settlements on a global scale. That means they have influence, economic, political, infrastructure, environmental influence globally. Other rankings play less of a central role than those two large cities. We can take a look at Chicago, for instance, which is a Alpha Plus city. That is a city that is going to have a lot of important infrastructure, a lot of important economic factors. Sorry, and it's also going to be a very important network that's linked with New York City and also to the west, as we talked about with our last unit, with being a perfect situational factor with the movement of manufactured output between both coastlines. And then we can see other cities around the world, and we look at emerging economies, or what's also referred to as the rapidly developing regions of Eastern Asia and Southeast Asia. You can see the large cities of Shanghai and Hong Kong, and then also Singapore. Well, Hong Kong and Singapore shouldn't come as a surprise, because we know that they're the first Asian tigers that adopted the international trade approach in the 1950s. And we can see other large, important service centers like in the Southwest. The most important and influential um, global city will be Dubai. All right, so in review, when we look at world cities, they're going to be business services that have large corporations, large financial institutions, large stock markets. They're going to have advanced communication and advertising. They'll also have the most specialized consumer services. They're going to have large retail headquarters. They'll have the largest thresholds and ranges of consumer services, and then they'll have specialized higher education. And then there'll also be, um, it'll also have the largest concentration of public services that have the largest range and threshold in the world, where they'll have huge influence over um, geopolitical power of the world, like the United Nations or the European Union. Labor unions would be another example of a specialized public service that would be found in major world cities. All right, when we talk about the um, the business services, as I already mentioned, London and New York are two of the most important and influential um, cities in the world. And then Tokyo is the third. However, as of 2020, Tokyo's well, we mentioned in Unit 2 that they have a population crisis. And what we're seeing currently in 2020 is now when we're looking at that population now tipping where it is going into the negative NIR. So there are future challenges with Tokyo staying amongst the dominant cities. And when we look at these three areas of the world, they have the largest stock exchanges. Um, New York City has three of the largest stock exchanges with NASDAQ, um, the NASDAQ, the S&P, um, and then the New York Stock Exchange. In Tokyo has the Nikkei, and the London Stock Exchange. Again, they have the largest stock exchanges. They have the most expansive transportation networks. When we think of New York City, it's the most used light rail system in the United States, the subway, but it's outdated. But we'll talk about that later. And then Tokyo is going to have some of the most rapid advancements that's linking many cities all throughout the islands of Japan. And then they'll have large financial institutions. Sorry, there's missing F there in the notes. And then it'll have, again, they'll have the largest concentrations of specialized services. All right, we can see 10 most world cities that have an influence on the economy in a globalized world. We can see the ranking follows what's laid out there. We can see Paris has moved up in the 2018 ranking. However, it's important to understand that Paris has some challenges that um, will keep it from being a world dominant city, which we'll talk about later. And then you see the emergence of Hong Kong. But then let's go down a little bit and we can see what's happening in East Asia with the rapid growing, with the rapid economic development of China, with Beijing coming in at ninth with the global influence on the economy, global economy. All right, when we talk about ranking cities, we go to major world cities. They have a less of an impact than world dominant cities, but they still have a large impact. As I already mentioned, Chicago, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. Chicago is going to have the largest agricultural exchanges. They're going to have the most expansive transportation infrastructure in the Midwest. Washington, D.C. is our capital, so it's our political epicenter. It's our Capitol building. So there's a lot of political specialized services in Washington, D.C. In Los Angeles, there's going to be very large businesses with um, entertainment, um, airplane industry, textiles, the movement of cargo ships, the largest port in the U.S., and and then we can see other areas of the world where they have impact with large business sectors And usually, and what we'll see with these major cities, they'll have advanced transportation networks. All right, then we come to a third ranking today, and that's command and control centers. Minneapolis and St. Paul would be a command and control center because we have headquarters of major corporations here. Corporations from 3M to Best Buy to Hormel to Cargill to Pillsbury to Mayo. And we are a regional and sub regional center. We have major transportation hubs. We have um, a major airport with two terminals. The um, we have the light rail, which now is looking to expand a line the Southwest Corridor here in 2020, and then we are the Center for Health and Medical Tertiary and Quaternary Services. All right, let's take a look at stock exchanges in the semi-periphery or emerging economies. Specifically, we look at stock exchanges in India and China. We can see that these areas are going to be very important. Um, they're going to have huge economic influence on the semi-periphery regions, especially new emerging regions like the baby tigers of Southeast Asia. And then we can see with Brazil the influence they're going to have in South America, and then um, the Johannesburg, South Africa Stock Exchange, and the influence they're going to have in Africa. Okay, let's move on to talk about regional specialization. Regional specialization is found throughout the United States, as we see with durable goods within Wisconsin and Ohio. You have the manufacturing in the Southeast. You have general business in the three largest U.S. cities, New York, Chicago, L.A. There we are going to see distribution of those specialized services within those three areas and advanced infrastructure in those three areas. And, um, and then we also have the high-tech sectors, the booming tech areas of the world as we move into this knowledge-based information world with the Tech Triangle in North Carolina or Silicon Valley in Palo Alto, or you can also look at the Boston College, Boston tech sector, um, where we see agglomerations. And these agglomerations are going to be very important for regional specialization of coordinary basic technology services. And then you have management, which is found in Washington, D.C., and then medical, which I already mentioned, Minneapolis, St. Paul, but also Detroit, Baltimore, and Cleveland. All right, and here we can look at these rankings of influence in the United States, and we can see where population concentrations are, and where Northeast again is where our core of wealth is found. And then we can see the linking of smaller cities according to the central place theory, and how we see large market areas both in New York and Chicago and San Francisco, which have the largest range thresholds. And then you go to smaller cities, which the smallest, maybe in terms of like a town, you could see is the purple. Cities like Montreal and Detroit and St. Louis and Minneapolis and Denver, where they have less influence, but they have usually one large specialization service and also advanced infrastructure. All right, let's turn our attention to megacities. Now we're talking about cities that have populations of 10 million people or more. In the 20th century, those cities were London, Tokyo, Paris, and New York. They were found in temperate climates. Today, megacities are not. They are found mostly in less developed regions, like Chennai or Bangkok and Manila, Philippines, or Jakarta, Indonesia, Karachi, Pakistan, Lagos, Nigeria, Dubai, and Rio de Janeiro. These are areas that have populations above 10 million people, and they are growing rapidly, and they're found in tropical regions. And we also know that in some of these areas, we're seeing the largest mass migration in human history, because several of these countries are in DTM stage 2. All right, this is a great video. I'm not going to play through notes, but It will be on my notes that you can watch, and I encourage you to watch it because it gives great information that could help you on the test. All right, and here's an interactive map. Again, you can take a look at the evolution of megacities. This shows you a great shot of some of the um, obstacles of megacities, and it also shows you the informal economy, which is going to be on the periphery of um, the rapidly growing urban primate cities. All right, let's talk about mega cities that are now linking large cities and expanding smaller ones, like we're seeing in China, where when you look at mega cities, often they are in the industrial area, so they're industrial manufacturing, providing services that move industrial manufactured outputs. Now, what we're talking is parts of China are moving beyond these manufacturing sectors, and they're moving to a knowledge-based economy. So when you move to a knowledge-based economy, you're talking about business services and you're talking about professional services where you need to be linked close by. So they have the connections of cities like Shenzhen, which is Shenzhen is like the Silicon Valley of China, where they are linked with other regions of China. And as they link, they will advance their transportation networks and their technology, their broadband width, their universities. And they will also stress the importance of these areas for um, economic growth with face to face interaction. And then what we're seeing is when you move to a meta city, now you're talking movement to high order tertiary and quaternary specialized jobs like in Shenzhen with the IT sector. These are when mega cities become meta cities. Now you're going industrialization to post industrial knowledge economy and linking the cities. And a lot of it removes the problems that come with mega cities like the informal economies found in the periphery of urban areas. All right, that'll take us to the end of the notes. Again, step 2, write your conclusion on Schoology. And I look forward to talking with each of you tomorrow.